Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Money Matters podcast, the show where we discuss important financial topics that were never covered in med school. I'm your host, Dr. Tarang Patel. Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Money Matters podcast. Some interesting news in the medical world this week. Dr. Atul Gawande, a surgeon from Brigham and Women's Hospital, was named CEO of the joint healthcare venture by Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, and JP Morgan Chase. He's a talented physician and author, and those who have met him or worked with him think he's a great choice and visionary. I've read one of his books previously called Being Mortal, and highly recommend it to those of you who have not read it. Some of his articles have also appeared in the New Yorker and the Atlantic and have been extremely well received as well. Mostly, I'm just glad a physician is put in charge of a company designed to improve healthcare costs and access. I also want to thank the members of the private Facebook group, Dr. Money Matters, for continued great discussion. If you haven't joined, I highly recommend you do so. On this episode, I interviewed Dr. Quynh-Lan Nguyen, a traveling hospitalist and blogger, about how she and her husband have turned credit card hacking into a lifestyle that allows them to travel around the world. We talk about her strategies and recommendation and whether it's still possible to do credit card hacking today. We also talk about her interest in the FIRE movement and how she and her investment banker husband both want to enjoy their life sooner rather than later. I myself have been using credit cards for travel purposes for a few years now, and my wife and I got the Southwest Companion Passes about 3 years ago, and that's allowed our family of 5 to basically travel free domestically and to Mexico a few times over the last 3 years, allowing us to save about $15,000 to $20,000 in airfare costs. I think the credit card companies are catching on to this and making things a bit more difficult now. So as Dr. Nguyen recommends, use your miles sooner rather than later. You can visit Dr. Nguyen's website to get the latest in tips and travel recommendations at smartmoneyandtravel.com. So let's get started with my interview with Dr. Quynh-Lan Nguyen. Okay, welcome to another episode of the Dr. Money Matters podcast. My guest today is Dr. Quynh-Lan Nguyen, a hospitalist out of Chicago, but she's a traveling hospitalist, as she describes it, and also a blogger along with her husband on the website smartmoneyandtravel.com, where they talk about personal finance and travel and credit card rewards. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Nguyen.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So we're gonna talk a little bit about your website and travel and stuff like that. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into medicine, and just how you got interested in personal finance also.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Vietnam for the first 10 years before we immigrated to California. Grew up there, and then I went to medical school, did my training in the East Coast, and now I live in the Midwest with my husband. He's not in medicine. He's in investment banking. So when I first started medical school, I wanted to choose OB-GYN. But when I started third year rotations and I scrubbed into a C-section and I was so traumatized. so not only did I not want to be an OB-GYN, but I no longer want to have children as well. So then, I was lost for a while, but I had really amazing mentors in internal medicine who steered me that way. And so I did my training in internal medicine. And then when my husband took a job in Chicago, we weren't sure how long we would be in Chicago. So instead of, being a primary care, I decided to be a hospitalist, a traveling hospitalist for a few years until we decide on where we settle long term. And then hopefully I would, establish my own primary care practice. But after being a hospitalist for about almost 2 years, I really love it. And I don't see myself doing anything else other than hospital medicine.
So when you say traveling hospitalist, so you work at several different places locally in Chicago, or do you go do locums all around?
So I actually have a full-time job. I work for a company, and they credential me at different hospitals in the Midwest region. So, in Iowa, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana. So, and then my assignment would be in one hospital for about 6 months. And then if another hospital in a different state needs me, then they would transfer me to a different hospital. So I've been flying back and forth between Illinois and Iowa ever since I started working. So I have full-time benefits. So it's kind of locums, like working it, but they guaranteed me 15 shifts a month. So I don't have to go look for a place for shifts. So I get full-time benefits and guaranteed 15 shifts a month.
Okay. And your husband is an investment banker in Chicago. So your base is now Chicago.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Your website it's a good website, and I like how you do a lot of reviews on the places that you've been,
right?
Things like that. And I know a lot of my listeners are, as physicians and healthcare professionals, pretty into traveling.
Right.
Let me ask you, where was your favorite place you've been?
That's tough because, we always put in a lot of effort to choose a place that we want to visit. So far, we haven't had any problems. I think our top three, I can't narrow it down. Our top three would be Japan, Taiwan, and Portugal.
Portugal.
So, okay. Yeah. Portugal is our favorite European country because, it's cheaper than other Western countries. And I personally love seafood. So I think Portugal has the best seafood that we've been to. Okay. And very friendly locals, so we love it.
Nice. Yeah, I've my sister went to Portugal, I think last year or so, and they had nothing but good things to say. And it's a little bit kind of hidden in the shadow of Spain,
right?
Literally.
Right.
You've done a fair amount of traveling, being just recently out of training. So on your website you talk about how you use credit cards. So does credit card hacking still work? I mean, it seems like there's so many websites out there now. The points are reduced, but clearly it does. So tell me how you guys go about it.
Yeah, so it still works. I mean, we found out about this while I was a second year in training in residency, because at that time we got engaged, and I've always wanted to take engagement photos in Paris. It's like the most romantic city in the world. So I was like, okay, well, after we got engaged, we were like, let's go to Paris. Cause we've been in a long distance relationship for over 10 years now. And, so we don't really have a place for us that's really special. So that's why we chose Paris. And so we, at that time he was in business school and I was in residency. So we didn't have a lot of money. So we looked into travel hacking to try to offset that. And so, of course, for the past 2 years, there's a lot of changes. Before, for example, my favorite trip was from Chicago to Hong Kong, and I flew in first class with Cathay, and I actually made $42 instead of paying. I actually made $42 to fly in first class from Chicago to Cathay to Hong Kong, and because at that time, I was able to apply for three Alaska credit cards at once, and each card had an annual fee of $75, but they gave us a $100 credit statement per card. So that's how I made money. But now, Bank of America changed the rules. You can only apply, 2 cards in a year or something like that. So each bank now, they're trying to tighten the rules because I think it's gotten more popular. More people know about it. So it's tougher, but it's still there. So that's why my husband and I, we get miles and we burn them immediately. We don't hoard them. We don't wait until when we retire to take nice trips. No, we just do it now. And then each year we have a plan, we want to go on one trip a year and we use those miles and points. So we burn them fast but it's still there. It's just, I think in the next couple of years, I think it will be more difficult. So I would advise, whoever wants to get into it, I think you should get into it now before it gets too difficult.
Right. Yeah. Because they do seem to devalue the points and you're absolutely right. That's a good strategy is having a plan and using them within the year. I like that idea.
Because ever since we started about 2 years ago, like American Airlines devalued their chart, United Airlines, Delta, and now the hotels as well. It costs more points, it costs more miles to get the same trip as you did like just a couple of years ago.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense. Like that's one of the reasons why we started this website, because at Smart Money and Travel, we want to encourage our friends, because they always ask us like, how do you go on these trips and not spending a lot of money? So instead of telling the same stories again, we'll be like, okay, read this. This is how we do it. Because in each review, we always say like how much it costs and how we did it.
Right.
So then they can follow that, and then they can copy that and travel. But we always tell them like, like don't wait until your children are like in college. Like just do it now, and you can travel with kids. It's so easy nowadays. So just do it now, like save your points, and then next year like redeem it, because it'll be tougher.
Well,
yeah,
I agree with that. The traveling with kids part, I may disagree with you a little bit about being easy, having experience doing it.
Right,
but I do agree that you definitely can, and we've done a fair amount of domestic traveling with our points. So it's been something that's worked out well for my family as well. But it's always nice to hear about people doing the big international trips. And traveling first class. Now that's and getting paid to do it. That's a good way to do it. Yeah. Right now, what would be if someone who's new to credit card churning or hacking, whatever you want to call it, what would be the card you recommend for personal use?
So we always, for our friends and our loved ones, we always recommend the Chase Sapphire Preferred. Because the first year is free. The annual fee of $95 is waived, and then you can get like 50,000 points once you meet, like the minimum spending requirement. And then you can use those points and you transfer to their different partners and redeem them. So because their Chase points are so valuable, because they're so flexible, that's why we always recommend that first. And I know like the annual fee turns a lot of people off. Right. So that's why we said, well, don't worry, the first year is free. So then you can try it, and then you can see how you like it. And if you don't like it, you can always cancel it.
And then any different recommendations for business cards?
So for business cards, we also have Chase Ink Preferred that we use to buy gift cards so that we can get points, Chase points. Okay. So for personal, we use the Chase Sapphire Preferred, and for business, we use the Chase Ink. Okay. Yeah.
So now what would you say to, I've brought this topic up with my friends, and then also on my Facebook group, about credit cards, because I've had good experience with them. But people will tell you that, using credit cards encourages you to spend more than you normally would. What would your response be? Because I've seen your website, you document your spending, and you seem to be pretty frugal about these things. So
I think that it requires a lot of discipline to have a credit card. So I don't recommend it to everyone. I think that if you can control your spending, because you're right, that's a fear that a lot of people have, and I think that's a very legitimate fear. So because it's so easy, like if you go to a store and you just swipe it, you're not really thinking about it because it's not deducted from your debit account. Right. So you don't really see until at the end of the month, and at the end of the month, oh my God, did I just spend $10,000? Like, how am I going to pay that back? Right. So that's why I think, like personally, it requires a lot of discipline. So you have to track your spending. You have to track how much you're spending, and if you're able to pay that back. Because if you don't pay back at the end of the month, all that interest is going to negate like all of the benefits that you get from the cards. Right. So, but most of the people in our community, in the fire community, like in your group and Physician on Fire groups and things like that, like a lot of us, I think we're pretty disciplined and we know about the pitfalls of credit cards. So I think that this is a good group that should benefit from these credit card hacking. Yeah,
and one of the things that is that I was just talking to a friend of mine about this, who just paid for a hotel on their trip, using points, and he's like, and basically one of the nice things is you actually avoid a lot of taxes because they don't tax. I mean, that may change in the future. So again, you never know. But as of now, points are not taxed, which is a nice thing. So. And then the other thing is, it's also pretty easy nowadays to track your spending with all these online tools.
Right.
Is there one that you use to do that?
We just use Personal Capital for everything.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's I think a lot of us use that.
Yeah.
So not only track spending, but investments and things like that.
Yeah, I use Personal Capital for my investments. I use Mint for my credit card stuff, but it doesn't really matter how you do it. It's just a lot of people use you need a budget or something like that. So
right.
It's fine as long as you do it. That's the key. Okay, so now, is there some place that you want to go see, but you haven't? I'm sure there's a few, but what's the next place that you want to see that you haven't been to yet?
So our next trip, we are in the process of planning to redeem our miles to go to Australia and New Zealand.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because it's it's far, and we're, even though I said in the beginning, I said I don't want kids anymore, but it's like that time. Right. So it's the next step, and we're probably going to have children next year. So we want to be able to go to New Zealand and Australia before they come along.
Okay.
So, but it's tough. It's like it always takes a long time to try to find availability for flights.
Right.
Like my husband's, I don't know, his work schedule is not as flexible as mine. So, but once we figure out the timeline, then we'll try to find ways to get to Australia, because that's always been our dream, but we haven't had time yet. We've been focusing on Asia for the last 2 years, but next we would like to go to Australia, and then once we have kids, I think we would want to travel locally, like in Caribbean, Mexico, and Europe. Yeah. Okay,
cool. Yeah, that was my wife and I's last big trip before we had kids. So yeah. Australia, nice.
Yeah. So it's tough to get there.
It is. It's a long flight. So that's the tough one with kids for sure.
Yeah.
But now, is it pretty restrictive in terms of, availability when you're booking?
I mean, so far, we're looking at dates like in November, December. I think it's a little bit too last minute. I think if you, for these kind of redemption, especially Australia is pretty popular, among the credit card community. So I think if you look, if your schedule is flexible, if you look like maybe 8 to 12 months ahead of time, I think it won't be too bad to find 2 seats. Yeah, but it's just because, we're looking we want to try like different airlines. So we want to try like their different business class products as well, because we want to write about it, in our blog. So it's just a little bit tougher for us. But I think for 2 people to Australia is not that bad. Like
you just mentioned, business class, or you had done a first class. Is availability for that usually better? And is it worth the premium that you pay in terms of number of miles?
You mean like between business and first class?
Or just economy and business, either way.
Ever since we took that business flight from Paris back to Philadelphia, we never want to fly in economy internationally again. So, this is why we're so into it. We between my husband and I, we have more than 30 credit cards because each flight, we just flew to Asia for spring break, and it was about 80,000 miles per person one way. For a round trip, that's like 160,000. So you need a lot of credit cards or to pay for that. So that's why we apply for a lot. But to us, it's really it's so much worth it, because I have motion sickness. So every time, even when I fly domestically for work, if it's just an hour flight, I get headaches and I get dizziness, if I don't sleep. So I try to sleep. For a 16-hour flight, that's not going to be very comfortable for me in economy. So that's why we're so aggressive with this hobby, because we don't want to fly in economy anymore. And another reason is because we also pay for our parents to go to Asia as well. And, because of their age, they're in their 60s and 70s and with health conditions. And so business class is a better way for them to travel. And they started this last year, and they're like, yeah, we don't want to travel in economy anymore either. so that's why between the 2 of us, we have to be, we are continuously, in our budget, we budget several $100s each month, to buy these miles, so that we can finance both of us and both sets of parents.
I'm sorry, when you say buying miles, so you're buying them in addition to the bonuses?
Yeah, because like the bonus, you just get it once.
Right.
Like when you get the sign up bonus, you get like 50,000. That's it. That's not even enough for a one way business class. So what we do is we have the Chase Ink, and then we just use that to go to Staples and buy Visa gift cards.
Okay.
So then, because they because at that time when we had the Chase Ink, they give us 5 points per dollar spent.
Mm-hmm.
So then we just buy several cards, and then we get like 10,000 points.
Okay.
So then those gift cards would buy money orders, and then those money orders we pay the credit card. So basically, we're not spending that much money to buy the points.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what we do, and so basically, my husband, we have a routine. Like he has the card, he buys the money order, he buys the gift cards, and then I go when I travel, I go and I use those gift cards and I buy the money orders, and then he pays the bills.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Yeah,
But
so that's how.
But you get 5x the points then, you said?
Yeah, but they changed that. Now they removed that category, so you can't have that in the new Chase Ink anymore.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got to kind of keep track of the different bonuses, and that's what your website's going to be good for, right? Is to kind of keep people aware of those. One of the other things that you mentioned while we're talking is about the FIRE community, and so you're part of this growing trend of physicians that want to achieve FIRE.
Yes.
Why? Why do you want to achieve FIRE? Which let me just clarify is financial independence, retiring early for those who don't know.
Yeah. I think, when I was a student, a medical student, like one of my attendings always said, it doesn't matter what you do, you'll get sued at some point in the future. It's just a matter of when. And I, it's unfortunate that, when we practice medicine, we have that like stuck in the back of our head, and I don't want that to happen. So, like when we discover this community, we're like, you know what, I'm going to practice medicine for 10 years, and then I'm just going to, do something else that's not restrictive, and that it's not stressing me out that, oh my gosh, I'm going to get sued and whatever, the hard work that I've done, like it's going to go into smoke. So that's why, like, I don't want that stress to go with me until I'm like 65. So, that's why we were so aggressive with paying off our loans, so that we're not dependent on our primary careers for the rest of our lives. So.
Okay. And now on the flip side, some would say, well, you're fortunate because your husband is in an investment banker. It's another high income field, but it's also a high stress field as well. So does he feel the same way about FIRE or?
Yes. He was actually the one that talked about it. He said, because his field, is actually even more stressful than my job. He works a lot more hours than I do, and it's not, and it's in investment banking. It's not very stable as a medical job. I feel like doctors, like there's always a job for us, but for those in banking, if the economy tanks, then they're not going to have any jobs. Right. So and then if they're not bringing money for the bank, they're going to get fired, things like that. So he actually brought this up a couple of years ago, but he was like, what, we're going to save money and then we're going to retire. I'm going to play golf and enjoy my life. And I was like, no, because I was raised, like we're both like first generation immigrants. And so, like people that we hung out with, like we didn't have anyone that retired early. Like we were taught, like, you got to work hard, go to school, get a job, and then you're going to retire when you're 65. Like that's what we knew. So I was like, no, you're going to work until you're 65 with me. Like we're not going to retire early, because at that time we had so much debt, and at that time I was still like in training, so I didn't think it was possible. And so and then just a few months ago, like in the end of 2017 was when I started like reading these blogs, and that's when it hit me. It's like, oh my gosh, like we can do it too. So we just have to, we just have to be mindful of our spending and save, and then then we can do it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the common themes is, the retire early part is optional, but I think most people want to achieve financial independence, and what they do, after that, even if they continue to work, I think the stress level goes down because that if something happens, you can walk away without difficulty. So, and so I don't think there's going to be a mass exodus of physicians anytime soon, and due to the FIRE movement. So from those who are worried about that, don't worry about it. Yeah. But now you mentioned, you're first generation. And so, I think you said your husband is also. So I myself also, and a lot of physicians have kind of, I think physicians themselves are overrepresented by the immigrant population. And so, we have a lot of common traits of, the hard work, and we've seen our parents work really hard to achieve achieve the goals and stuff like that. So what do they think of you potentially retiring early? Is that something you've discussed with them?
Yeah, we've discussed with them, and they don't understand it. They're like, what are you going to do with your time? Because even now, my dad, it's funny because my dad is like he's 72, and he retired for a while, but he was so bored with the retirement that he actually just got back to work a few months ago, so that's why when we discuss this with our families, they don't really understand it, because like I said, like, it's not something that they see their friends doing. They just have like, all they do is just work. But now, I think after a while, I think, we've been talking about this, like every time we come home and visit, and I think they're starting to see it now, but it's still, it's still like a different journey that they cannot comprehend at this time. Yeah.
No, I get it. I think this is one of those things that they would just say it's a generational difference, but
right.
It seems to be catching hold with a lot of younger physicians. So,
Yeah.
I think ultimately it will be a good thing if it encourages them to live within their means. So, how has the blog been going so far?
It's okay. It's just because right now we both have full-time jobs. And so we only work on it when we have spare time, and because both of us, like, we work a lot, and we're so stressed right now. In the meantime, like, if we have time off, we would like to go and travel and visit our parents. So we haven't done really a good job of advertising our blog and reaching out. So that's our goal for this year, is try to reach out to both, the physician community as well as the FIRE community more.
Right. Well, yeah. I'm sure it'll catch hold, because I like we said, this type of information is definitely is needed out there, and I feel like these type of topics are growing faster and faster in terms of interest. So good. Well, I want to thank you Dr. Nguyen, for coming on this podcast, and I encourage my listeners to check out your website, smartmoneyandtravel.com. Anything else you want to mention?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me on here. It was a good chat. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you.
So let me know, if any listeners have any questions about travel hacking, just or my traveling job, then just send us an email at smartmoneyandtravel@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Dr. Money Matters podcast. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Quynh-Lan Nguyen, for appearing on the show and sharing her great credit card tips and travel tips. You can visit her website at www.smartmoneyandtravel.com. And I want to thank you for continuing to listen to and supporting this podcast. More episodes of this podcast, if you haven't heard all of them yet, are available at drmoneymatters.com or on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and all episodes are also available audio only on YouTube and Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter at drmoneymatters or on Instagram or Facebook at Dr. Money Matters, all spelled out. And once again, please leave us positive reviews on Apple Podcast and share this podcast with your colleagues. Look forward to joining you again soon with another episode. Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Money Matters podcast, the show where we discuss important financial topics that were never covered in med school. I'm your host, Dr. Tarang Patel.